Human beings are wired for empathy. We do best in small-scale villages, small-scale communities, but that's not the world we live in at this point. So how all this connects back to psychopathy is that there's a concept called the Dunbar's number in information systems, and people that study social networks and stuff like that usually are familiar with that number, which is 150. But that number refers to the statistical maximum number of meaningful character assessments that an individual human mind can keep track of at any one time. Over the course of a lifetime, the people in that 150 will of course change a lot, but at any one time your brain can only keep track of 150 meaningful character assessments for other people. So now that number is a very theoretical number based on a correlation between a part of our brain that corresponds to the same part of the primate brain and stable tribe sizes for, not tribes, what are they called, like not herds, groups in primate social structures, stable size groups. Okay, so they correlate that number with or Dunbar correlated that number based on the size of that portion of the brain, and extrapolated from that how big our stable group size ideally would be, and he came up with 150. Okay, so anyway, the number is based on a lot of theory, but another couple of scientists came up with Bernard and Kilworth came up with the Bernard-Kilworth number, which is more empirically based and is roughly double the Dunbar's number, and it's based on a lot more research and observation of stable human group sizes and things like that. And it's actually a range of numbers, but it's just, I think it's like 225 to 290 or something like that. The exact number is not the point. The point is, if you assume that somewhere in the middle, or not in the middle, it's somewhere around that number range of 150 to 300, say, is the sweet spot for human beings being able to keep track of each other's movements and the trustworthiness of other people. You gotta also look at the size of the structures that we subject ourselves to, not necessarily even voluntarily at this point. In fact, most of the time it's not voluntarily. Like the legal structure, the educational system, our jobs can function within that number, but typically large corporations are a good deal bigger than But if you have, the political system or like I said, the legal system, that we all have to interface with at various points, these are completely orders of magnitude bigger than the numbers that I just described. And so whereas in most of our evolutionary history, the advantage was to people who had an abundance of compassion and empathy, because the group, the health of the group was at least as important as the health of the individual in terms of continuing the genes of that individual. Now we've gotten to a point where where the advantage is to liars, manipulators, cheaters, people who have no guilt, no remorse, no conscience, and that's because you can't keep track of them. If you have a huge bureaucratic structure where somebody can come in and there's layers of this. You have in our culture a very legalistic, very litigious society that results in people at the administrative level not wanting to put their necks out to do the right thing. They're going to be looking for how to cover their ass, and so this is part of the reason why you've got, again, secondary psychopaths who are looking out at this and consciously or unconsciously coming to the conclusion that if you can't beat them, join them. So it's not that it's a direct problem of sociopaths doing direct damage to people or structures or designing things so that it screws people in a particular way. It's that none of that's really necessary. The problem is that we've gotten to the point where we are all subject to these large bureaucratic structures, and they're not, our brains don't work well in those structures, so we have the problems that we have, and people think, oh, the problem is education. The problem, or if people just knew the right information, they would do the right thing. No, not these people. I mean, there are parts of the problem that can be solved by education, but this is a part of the reason that I want to do this, and why other people are trying to do this is an educational motivation, that people need to know that this is what they're dealing with and not get confused and think it's some other problem. So, and I also want to mention that psychopathy, sociopathy is evenly distributed across all races, ethnicities. It has nothing to do with there's no concentration of it in one particular group or another. That's what I mean by, in a previous video, I was talking about how evolutionarily we must have had a genetic bottleneck, because it seems like most, if not everybody, has the latent genetics to manifest psychopathy, and it's evenly distributed amongst all these groups. So so in other words, there were enough calamities that occurred, and the ones that survived, our ancestors, some of them were psychopaths, and so we have it encoded in us now because we came from that lineage. Okay, that's enough for now.